Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Russell Glasser, and my co-host this week is my sister, Keryn Glasser.
Hi.
We are very literate and stuff on this show. We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Crescent City Beignets at 1211 West 6th Street, a couple of blocks west of Lamar. That starts at 11:30 and is open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't need to be a member to come. That's every Sunday except for the third Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. The next lecture will be August 21st, except that it won't be a lecture, it will be discussion of bylaw changes. The next lecture after that will be September 24th. Other regular events include Godless Gamers every Monday at 7 o'clock at my house. See the website, www.atheist-community.org, for information on how to contact me and get directions, or email tv@atheist-community.org, and I will get it. Also, Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays at 7:30 at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. You can check the website calendar for more information on regular and special events. We also have a regular internet audio show called The Non-Prophets every Saturday on freethoughtradio.com. The show is hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, and also features Matt Dillahunty and me, your intrepid host. We also have now our own website. That's www.nonprofitsradio.com. Where you can download the last 2 episodes which have been missing from the website for a while. So go check it out. Great shows recently. The next live show, we did not have a live show yesterday. The next one will be on July 30th, next week. The ACA has a board meeting on the second Sunday of every month before the regular meeting. Currently, we are meeting at Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar, south of the bridge. All ACA members are welcome to come and sit in on board meetings, but only board members may vote. The next board meeting will be, the second Sunday of next month. If you enjoy the program today and you think you would like to come and meet us, we regularly meet for dinner after the show. Currently, we are meeting at Shanghai River on 2700 West Anderson Lane. That's a Chinese buffet that we've been going to for about a month. As with our other events, atheists and atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. Of course, we're eating dinner then, so don't come to convert us. If you want to convert us, then call once we put the phone number up on this show. That Shanghai River is in the same parking lot as the Alamo Draft House. Just drive down Anderson Lane between Mopac and Burnett until you see the big marquee, then go toward the back of the parking lot. We will be there after the show starting at around 6:45, and so you can come out and hang out with us and our crew and all the other people who put this show together. That does it for the regular announcements. I have a couple of things that I'd like to clear up from last week, but you can take the camera off me now. Let's see. Last week, first of all, we had an African American woman call in, and I mistakenly told her that I couldn't think of any other African American women who are also in our group. Turns out I'm an idiot. I've known 2, at least. And one of them is still
very active.
Very active.
Member.
Actually, I'm not sure she's a member. But
like
she comes to game night all the time.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
If you want to meet her, you can come to game night too.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, last week we also had a caller call in and start to talk about the war, and you might have noticed out in the home audience that I wasn't moving the conversation along very well, and mentioned that we don't have an official position on the war on this show. I got email last week from Jason, who wrote, "When you guys say on the show that there are people in the ACA that support the war, what is an approximate percentage? I would think it would be very small, but I could be wrong." And then he sent me a link to a flash video which showed all about what an awful thing the war is. My answer to Jason, and I didn't print out my reply email, but I'll tell you now, is that basically this show is an outreach to all atheists and all potential members of the Atheist Community of Austin. I think from personal experience that the number of people who support the war are very small. Are probably very small, but I know for a fact that there are some. In fact, I had a detailed conversation about it last week, and while I don't think it's irrelevant, we try to avoid politics for the most part on this show, since we know that basically having an official position cuts down on the number of people who essentially feel welcome in the Atheist Community of Austin. Now, having said that, my sister and I have prepared a topic this week that's all about politics. Do you want to start, or should I?
You can start.
I can start. That means I have to dig through all my notes to find the most useful thing to start with.
Okay, I'll start.
We got...
Fine, go.
I found it. I'm a good digger. John Roberts. Hey, in case you haven't been paying attention to politics,
I've been watching The Daily Show.
The Daily Show, yes. There's a new Supreme Court justice on the way. Sandra Day O'Connor is retiring, and I think a key question that is on a lot of atheists' minds these days, in addition to what is this going to mean for the separation of church and state, is what's this going to mean for Roe versus Wade? Now, before I wade into this topic, I want to make sort of a caveat, which is that, like the war, I know that there are at least some pro-life abortion, pro-life atheists out there, and you guys are welcome to call in. At the same time, we've had these discussions in detail in the past, and a lot of the people I know agree that most of the arguments against abortion are religious in nature. So we're going to talk about it. It's a controversial subject.
Feel free to call in and ask controversial questions.
Right.
As soon as we put the number up on the screen.
So I could go one of two ways, actually. We could have this fascinating philosophical discussion about why a lot of atheists are pro-choice, or we could launch straight into looking at what John Roberts means for this issue.
Let's launch into John Roberts.
John Roberts. Okay. So what we've been hearing about John Roberts is that he doesn't have much of a record to judge on, but he has written some opinions that seem to be anti-abortion, basically. But we've been assured by some people that those were not his personal opinions. He was just writing on behalf of the first Bush administration. This article comes from the New York Times. It's entitled, "A Year of Work to Sell Roberts to Conservatives." For at least a year before the nomination of Judge John G. Roberts to the Supreme Court, the White House was working behind the scenes to shore up support for him among its social conservative allies, quietly reassuring them that he was a good bet for their side in cases about abortion, same-sex marriage, and public support for religion. Boy, we got the trifecta right there. When the White House began testing the name of Judge Roberts on a short list of potential nominees, many social conservatives were skeptical. In hearings for the confirmation to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, he had called the original abortion rights precedent the settled law of the land and said, "There is nothing in my personal views that would prevent me from faithfully and fully applying that precedent." And they were frustrated, as many Democrats were this week, by his not having left a long record of speeches and opinions that laid out his views. But with a series of personal testimonials about Judge Roberts, his legal work, his Roman Catholic faith, and his wife's public opposition to abortion, two well-connected Christian conservative lawyers, Leonard Leo, chairman of the Catholic Outreach for the Republican Party, and Jay Sekulow, chief counsel of an evangelical Protestant legal center founded by Pat Robertson, gradually won over most social conservatives to nearly unanimous support, even convincing them that the lack of a paper trail was an asset that made Judge Roberts harder to attack. Why don't you read this article?
Okay.
This comes from Salon.com, which is a distinctly liberally slanted site, so it's a little bit more blunt about its comments.
A stealth candidate? No. From where we sit, it sure seems hard to make the case that John Roberts is some kind of stealth candidate from the Supreme Court. Even putting aside the anti-civil rights pro-prosecution decision he has reached in his short tenure as a federal appellate judge. Sorry, he tried to coach me on that before the show. It's not exactly a secret that Roberts has spent much of his adult life in the service of Republican presidents, or that he has argued 39 cases before the Supreme Court, or that he has advanced hard-right Roe reversing arguments along the way. Maybe John Roberts was just a lawyer advocating zealousy for his clients, as the lawyer's code of ethics requires him to do. Every lawyer we've ever known has had to make, at one point or another, an argument for a client that he might not want to make for himself. But when you make a career out of advancing a particular line of ideological argument when you work, again and again and again, for clients who you know are going to want you to make such arguments, well, it's fair to conclude that you're one of two things: a true believer or a sellout. If Roberts didn't agree with what he wrote on behalf of first President Bush administration in 1990, Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided and should be overruled, why didn't he find someone else to sign off on that brief? Why did he come to the aid of Operation Rescue in another brief he wrote for the Bush administration 3 years later? Why did he continue to work in the Solicitor General's office until 1993? Why did he make a contribution to the Bush-Cheney campaign? And what do you suppose Judge Roberts talks about over the dinner table with his wife, who had a leadership role in a group called Feminists for Life?
So that's two mentions of that. I'd recommend that our watchers go look at Feminists for Life to see exactly what it is that Judge Roberts stands for. Mm-hmm. So that is what that is some food for thought about the guy who might be the next Supreme Court justice. So now we're going to shift and talk about abortion in more general terms. Right?
Yeah, and a lot of people, haven't really heard much about this Judge Roberts guy. They call him a stealth candidate because people haven't been talking about his reputation in the news and trying to find ways to slander him and talking about his record and all that kind of stuff, and then he just pops up and gets appointed to Supreme Court. But I did a little bit of research before the show. I went to the National Abortion Federation website, and they had an article before he was nominated to be the next Supreme Court justice, about how they suspected he was going to be nominated and were strongly opposing it because of his as they phrase it, they said, "We also opposed Roberts when he was nominated to the District of Columbia Circuit because of his hostility towards Roe v. Wade." So the National Abortion Federation saw this coming and saw it as a bad thing because they already knew at the time how anti-abortion John Roberts was. Now, anti-abortion is a really, really hot, controversial issue which has divided the nation for years and years and years. And the reason it's important on an atheist show, as Russell was saying...
I should mention that a significant majority of America, particularly women, support abortion rights.
As a matter of fact, I have a statistic about that somewhere, but I don't think I'm prepared with it. I was going to say it's been a hot issue that's divided the nation for many, many years, but most of the arguments are fueled by religious debate. On the pro-choice side, women and the general public tend to feel that women should have the right to control what happens to their bodies. They feel that, especially in cases of molestation and incest and rape, and when a woman's life and health are in jeopardy, a woman should have the right to have an abortion. Why don't we talk about what Judaism says about it?
Okay. First of all, actually, I'd like to mention what Christianity says about it, even though most people probably
know.
Most people probably know because it's out there a lot.
They think it's wrong.
I should say, I should mention that basically saying that women have the right to control their own body is a tough sell to make among conservative Christians because they believe that abortion is equivalent to murdering a human being. And I have to say that if I believed that, then I'm not sure I would really go for the argument of well, it's about control of the person's body. It's not a coincidence that the side that favors abortion calls themselves pro-choice, because that's one way of framing the issue, and Christians like to frame themselves as pro-life.
Right.
Neither one of them calls themselves anti-choice or anti-life, because
pro-death.
Essentially, yes, pro-death, because they have different perspectives on the issue. I'd like to clarify my position as an atheist, which is essentially that if you consider as an atheist, I don't believe in magical things. I don't believe that there's a soul. I don't believe that there's a particular instant when a sperm becomes a human being. Every time a man has a wet dream, for example, millions and billions of little sperm just go off and die. I mean, seriously, they were alive, but I mean, by the definition of life, they were living cells, and they die. It happens all the time. Now, people who call themselves pro-life say that the instant that a sperm enters an egg, it's now a human it's now not just a life, but a human being that must be protected. And technically, I gotta say, it's alive and it's human. But so is a sperm. Well, I mean, it is a product of human genetics.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody would argue that. But then again, technically, so is the sperm. And there is nothing in particular, there's nothing particularly magical about what happens the instant that a sperm enters the egg, unless you believe that suddenly, poof, there's a soul there.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, and this is where all the gay sex and masturbation debates come in, is it's about wasting sperm, wasting life, which is equivalent to murdering. But you can make the same argument for women every time we menstruate.
Do they really? I'm not sure that they say that every time you...
Which part?
So every time you ejaculate, they actually do believe that there's millions of babies killed.
As far as I've heard religiously, and people are welcome to call into the show and contradict me, but religiously the main problem with being gay or masturbating is that you are wasting sperm, wasting life. That's what I've heard. In fact, I used to be able to quote the passage in the Bible that talked about that.
I'm not sure that's all of them. I mean, Catholics believe... Catholics are against birth control, for instance. And I think it's precisely for the reason that you mentioned. And in fact, in Monty Python's Meaning of Life, they had a hilarious song called "Every Sperm is Sacred."
Right. Now you could make the same.
But Protestants aren't all. I mean, even the hardline Protestants, I think, aren't necessarily against birth control. So I'm not sure that, and I'm pretty sure that I've heard pro-lifers basically make the argument that the instant a sperm enters the egg, all of a sudden it's a human being that has all the same rights as something else.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if you're going to make the case that wasting any sperm is murder, like every time somebody has a wet dream, you can make the same case for every time a woman has a menstrual cycle. If she actually gets through the month without getting pregnant and manages to have her menstrual cycle, then, she's committing murder and, negating the possibility that could have been a life, which means you could try and keep this woman pregnant for her entire life. And she'll have
which
25
logically
babies
means
before
she should
dies.
have non-stop sex unless she's pregnant.
Awesome.
I don't know. Well, I mean...
Sorry. Okay.
I mean, having personally had experience with a pregnant woman, I know that for a couple of months after they've had a baby, they're not that interested in the subject, if I may mention that.
Get off me.
All right. So there was this decision in 1973, Roe versus Wade, which is famously notorious, and it essentially established that laws against abortion, on a state-by-state basis, for instance, violate a constitutional right to privacy, and effectively they overturned all state laws outlawing or restricting abortion. Roe versus Wade was a bit complex to understand, but basically what Roe versus Wade said was that in the first trimester, which is the first 3 out of 9 months of a pregnancy, abortion is okay. In the second trimester, there's a gray area, and in the third trimester, it's generally not okay unless there's a serious issue about threat to the life of the woman or other such considerations. I mostly agree with that argument because when you look at the extremes, it's it's really hard to argue that in the first day after a woman has become pregnant, there's actually anything much more than a sperm and an egg there. But on the other hand, on the day before you deliver, ew. You don't really want to think about having an abortion at that point.
Oh.
So obviously, there is going to be a lot of gray area in the middle, and the question was laying out where that gray area shows up. And that's what the Supreme Court addressed in 1973 in Roe versus Wade. All right, so you wanted to mention the Jewish abortion issue. Okay, I've got a couple of things here. I've heard a Jewish rabbi talk about this. Keryn and I, of course, are both Jewish atheists, and you can call and whine about how that's impossible, and we'll explain it to you.
A rabbi and the priest are talking about abortion. Wait, I've heard this one. Sorry.
Exodus 21:22. What the rabbi said was basically that Jews don't think that abortion is that big a deal as Christians do, and that's kind of important in the discussion because a lot of the arguments against abortion come out of the Old Testament, and in fact, the Jews who only read the Old Testament and not the new one, which they think isn't really a testament, don't have such a big problem with abortion. And in fact, so this rabbi mentioned Exodus 21:22, which says, "If men fight and hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart from her," and that is translated as fetus, and yet no mischief follow, he shall surely be punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And I think there's more specific stuff in that passage about how much money the miscarriage is worth. But if abortion is actually considered murder in the Old Testament, then that is kind of in stark contradiction to the whole life for a life thing. However, this site that I printed it off of, www.religioustolerance.org, mentions that verse 22 is confusing. The Hebrew word yatzah literally means to lose her offspring. This has been mistranslated in different Bible versions as 1. A miscarriage. This would imply that the fetus died immediately as a direct result of the accident. Assuming no further harm happens, e.g. the woman does not die, the man responsible would have to pay a fine. The amount would be set by her husband and approved by the judges. This would imply that the death of the fetus was not considered to be the death of a human person. If it were, then the man responsible would be tried for murder and executed. However, because the fetus had possible future economic worth to the father, he would have to be reimbursed monetarily for his loss. The other translation is premature birth. This implies that the fetus is born earlier than the full term. Assuming no further harm happens, e.g. that neither the woman nor the baby dies, then the man would pay a fine. The verse is ambiguous about this point. The New International Version of the Bible uses the phrase gives birth prematurely and offers miscarriage as an alternate translation in a footnote. These two translations result in totally opposite interpretations, one supporting the pro-choice faction, the other supporting the pro-life movement. However, I would repeat that this was a rabbi using the Old Testament to bolster his case for being pro-choice. Another link that I have here from Jewfac.org, it was pointed out to me by our sometimes co-host Matt Dillahunty, says, Jewish law not only permits, but in some cases requires abortion. Where the mother's life is in jeopardy because of the unborn child, abortion is mandatory. The Talmud makes no bones about this. It says quite bluntly that if the fetus threatens the life of the mother, you must cut it up within her body and remove it limb by limb if necessary.
Ooh.
I'm sorry if the language bothers you. Keryn, what's the Talmud?
So the Talmud, oh God, don't ask me that.
I'm sorry.
Is a book. It's not part of the Old Testament, but it's sort of a rabbinical writing that I think a bunch of rabbis got together and wrote after.
Right. I think it's centuries worth of commentary on the Bible, which is treated as at least semi-authoritative by Orthodox Jews.
Right, because there's a law that God said somewhere, and I can't remember the exact wording, as it is said, so shall it be, that a certain elite group of rabbis, when they lay down laws, it's equivalent to being God's law. So that's how the Talmud is viewed as a big, important book in Judaism. I have one. Right. I can bring it in next time.
Yeah, so, I should clarify here that we personally don't care what the Bible, to some extent, we don't care what the Bible says about abortion because we don't believe that the Bible is divinely inspired. We don't think that there is such a thing as a divine thing to inspire it. But it's something that our religious viewers might want to consider in the matter.
Now, I have some more stuff I can read.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm gonna, talk a little bit about sort of the political and economic view of abortion, some of the factors that are involved here that I pulled off of the National Abortion Federation. The studio has that website if they want to put it up. The best statistic that I could get was that national polling consistently shows that the majority of Americans support a woman's right to choose. That's as specific as I got. Here's some of the arguments that I think are most compelling. Some people might disagree with me and think it's not very compelling, but when abortion was illegal in the U.S., desperate women often paid exorbitant fees to obtain abortions even from unlicensed, untrained practitioners working in frightening non-sterile conditions. Dangerous medical complications were likely to follow these illegal abortions, resulting in lengthy hospital stays. Increased financial and health costs and a serious drain on hospital maternity resources. Complications from back alley abortions were a leading cause of maternal death when abortion was legally prohibited, exacting a huge price from American families. Now, if a woman really desperately wants an abortion, she's going to get one. It's a question of how controlled it is and how safe and how sterile it is. She's going to get one either way. If she gets a botched abortion from an untrained doctor, she's going to, rack up lots of medical bills when she goes to the hospital to have this problem fixed. That's going to come out of taxpayer dollars. Now, if abortion is illegal and all this stuff is happening, if you oppose abortion, don't have one. Now,
there's a bumper sticker for you.
There's a bumper sticker for you. I've seen it. It's a good bumper sticker. Now, in terms of...
Except, and I want to be fair to the other side here, if you believed that abortion was murder, the argument, if you oppose murder, then don't commit any, they wouldn't go for that.
Oh, no, I don't think so either. I love it. We haven't even put the number up yet, and we have full lines.
No, we have.
What? Oh, okay.
Briefly.
I missed
We
that.
had one caller before the number was up, and then we got two more immediately.
Oh, okay. All
So, hey...
Sweet.
Controversy.
That's what happens when you talk about controversial stuff. Okay. Let me just go over some more of this stuff from the National Abortion Federation. The Hyde Amendment. Now, since abortion is legal, you got this health care issue, who pays for it, all that kind of stuff. The Hyde Amendment denies federal Medicaid funding.
Do you happen to know if this is from Henry Hyde?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Who, without... What?
Illinois Congress.
Yeah, who, without being judgmental, is nuts.
Okay. Well, there was a Hyde Amendment in 1973, I think, which denies federal Medicaid funding for abortion except in specific rare circumstances, and most states have similar laws restricting financial help to women who need abortions. So if you want to get an abortion, you have to pay for it yourself. When women are denied abortions that they seek because their insurance or Medicaid plans do not cover them, there are both real and hidden costs that their families, and other taxpayers must bear.
This isn't Henry Hyde talking, right?
No.
Okay.
This is the National Abortion Federation in an article called Economics of Abortion. And, of course, this has nothing to do with whether or not you think it's murder, whether or not you think it's life. It has to do with whether or not you think, a lot of taxpayers say, oh, we don't want to pay for an abortion because we oppose it and it's going to cost taxpayers money, blah, blah, blah. So when a woman seeks abortion and is denied insurance coverage, because, there are both real and hidden costs that their families, and other taxpayers must bear. There is also a social cost associated with forcing some women to bear children when they are not prepared to be mothers or when parents are unable to support their children. Some women, without money to pay for an abortion, attempt to induce it themselves. This usually fails, resulting in delays for seeking surgical abortion. Self-induced abortion attempts are often medically very dangerous, leading to serious complications or death. Those who oppose public funding for abortions call it an unfair burden on taxpayers. In fact, funding restrictions on abortion cost taxpayers millions of dollars every year due to the much higher cost of prenatal care and childbirth and the secondary costs of unplanned births. Now, again, it is legal, but despite the fact that abortions have been made legal, in 1973 were made, or constitutionally legal.
We're not allowed to be made illegal anymore.
We're not allowed to be made illegal. Despite that fact, 87% of all U.S. countries have no identifiable abortion provider. In non-metropolitan areas, the figure rises to 97%. There's also increased complications with receiving an abortion due to a shortage of trained abortion providers, state laws that make getting an abortion more complicated than is medically necessary, continued threats of violence and harassment at abortion clinics, state and federal Medicaid restrictions, and fewer hospitals providing abortion services. I know that we have a lot of hospitals in Austin that are religiously owned.
Yeah, well, there have been hospitals that were bought out by Catholics, for instance, and then
Am I allowed to say it on the air, or is that slander?
What? Well, it's not slander if it's true.
Yeah, Seton Medical Center has many, many branches all over Austin. There's Seton Northwest, Seton Central, Seton South, Seton Main. They're all over, and it's a very big, very well-funded, good hospital, but they will not even discuss abortion with you.
Right, and that was not the case before they got turned into a Catholic hospital, basically.
Mm-hmm. And as a social worker, I once tried to apply for a job there, and I did have to, deal with my own feelings about working for a place that won't even let you talk with families about your options.
Right.
Even those.
Do we want to? Maybe we should start taking all these callers.
Yeah, I just have one last paragraph. Let me finish it, and then I'll be done.
I got more to say, but if the lines ever slow down.
Even those young doctors who are committed to providing safe abortions to their patients may have trouble getting the training they need. A survey in 1998 revealed that the first trimester abortion techniques are a routine part of training in only 46% of America's OBGYN residency programs. About 34% offer this training only as an elective, and 7% provide no opportunity at all for young doctors to learn to do safe abortions.
Okay, who knows how these calls are going to turn out?
Let's see, this will be fun.
Again, we are not stating the official atheist position on abortion because, like a lot of things, there is no official atheist position on darn near anything.
Except that we don't believe in God.
Right.
That's it.
So if you want to call and talk about that, that's fine too. We're going to start with Terry. Hello.
Well, howdy.
Hi.
Howdy.
And of course, you realize by doing this show, you guys are going to be introducing or getting called godless abortionists and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we are.
We get called that all the time. That's kind of the point of our show, is to educate people and
I don't personally perform abortions.
promote awareness, and I've never had one.
So this actually does involve even the First Amendment, which has to do with freedom of religion and freedom of expression, as probably different people on different sides of the issue are aware. I think one of the confusing things that comes in here, and I'll bring the religion thing back in a moment, which then does have a lot to do with the atheist point of view. When people are talking about life, bacteria are life, so that's really not the test here.
Right.
Don't use antibacterial soap. That's murder.
So the test
Keryn's a vegan. Don't get her started.
I am a vegan. Don't get me started.
So the test really is not whether it's alive. The test is so that for all the people who are saying pro-life and all that, I get that pro-bacteria. The test is personhood. Now personhood is a lot more challenging, but personhood deals with the law, which is what we're talking about, the law. And that means when you're using the term person, you're talking about an entity that has rights and obligations. Now, if there's any science fiction fans in the audience, or perhaps on the set there, you remember the Star Trek: The Next Generation. That first, the early episodes used to drive me crazy with some of their irrationalities. But then they won my goodwill because they got into the personhood issue in regards to Commander Data, who was an android.
Yeah, and there's another movie too, Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams. I just thought that movie was wonderful, brilliant about that issue. It was really well done.
So there's also...
Yeah, well, these are all rip-offs of Isaac Asimov.
Well, the point is, the concept is that personhood and human DNA are not necessarily synonymous. There are critters born with human DNA that don't even have brains.
Right.
And cephalic births. In other words, there's no brain there. That can hardly be called a person. So currently in law, in the Constitution, the United States of America, the person is defined as, human DNA, natural born, and that's the 14th Amendment, essentially. They cleaned up that business about some individuals being two-thirds of a person. It took them a long time to actually include the other half of who's on the set here, women before you had full rights. But that's what we're talking about, personhood. And that's one of the things that can clarify the discussion. And then you realize, well, this is not limited to human abortion, the human abortion issue. We are in the 21st century. We are about to either create or encounter or discover other forms of life that may pass the test. I'm going to throw out my own 3 things that I think are, and that I use as a tentative criteria for who or what gets to be the regarded as a person. I'm going to say that that number 1 is does it have sentience? In other words, the ability to consider essential information about one's environment. Number 2, agency. Does it have the power to act materially in that environment? Number 3, conscious volition, or in other words, free will to intervene between stimulus and response. Because if you don't have that, then you can't really have personhood, because personhood in the law deals with an entity that has rights and obligations. There's no such thing as having rights without the reciprocal, which is obligations.
It shouldn't have anything to do with whether it has DNA or whether it has a human soul, because we can at least imagine that there could be something that is conscious and intelligent, like data, which doesn't have any human DNA in it at all. In fact, there was a really good discussion of that in the Ender's Game series, which Keryn is just starting to read, so I don't want to give any spoilers, really. But the discussion sort of centers around, when is it okay to attack an alien? I mean, these, aliens are clearly, the aliens in this science fiction series are clearly sentient. So shouldn't we try to exhaust all forms of communication first and not just blow them up just because we don't understand them yet?
Right, because frankly, that criteria of, well, if it's not like me, then I don't really have to afford it or recognize all the rights and obligations of a full person. Well, that's the same thing that's the same exact paradigm that was used to justify things like, well, a black person's not really a person, they can be a piece of property, they can be bought and sold. So it's the same thing that sustains bigotry and prejudice. We have to transcend that. So to the religious people in the audience, because I'm going to bring the First Amendment back in here again, do you really want any particular religion to be brought into the law of the land, the Constitution, all that kind of stuff, as a criteria? Because I know you're assuming that it's your religion that's going to set the criteria, but the whole idea of the First Amendment was to recognize that, hey, it might not be your religion that gets to set the criteria. So maybe no religious test should be allowed.
You don't have to think real hard about what could happen if it was the wrong religion, because, a lot of moderate Protestants would say, yeah, let's outlaw abortion. If the wrong group got in, then it could be Catholic extremists who say, okay, birth control of all kinds is now illegal, even for married couples.
You get Sikhs into power, and it's going to be illegal to eat meat.
So let me throw these next 3 things out really quick to bring it back to the abortion issue. Personhood, at what point do rights and obligations accrue to the developing individual? Well, the spectrum of opinion is from the moment of conception, spiritual, before even physical zygote, through physical gestation to birth, and a few years beyond. Human infanticide is actually not regarded as murder in some societies. Well, that's not true of ours, of course. But
well, it is legally, but wait, what?
And
I'm sorry, what?
Infanticide, killing babies.
I thought he said it's not considered. I'm sorry.
In some societies, it's not.
Sorry,
considered
wasn't paying
murder.
attention.
That's not true of our society. We consider it murder.
Right.
Obligation, that's the second one, obligation. So if the developing individual is in fact deemed a person, what, if any, duty to that person exists to provide support? I would just say no person has an automatic claim on the resources of another person to provide them with support, but did voluntary action by the host person create an obligation to the dependent person? Third and final point.
Well, I mean, yes, they do. I mean, we have Child Protective Services, for instance, who, I mean, you know, once kids are born, parents absolutely do have an obligation to their kids. And if you neglect your kids and don't feed them, for instance, then they can be taken away, for instance.
Now, see, I'm not. All I'm doing is describing the landscape. You took a position in there, but understand, people who are against abortion might take your position and say, well, you know, perhaps it applies before birth too. Third and final point that I would make, for me anyway, fatal eviction. If the host person has a right to deny support to the dependent person, does the host person's right to evict, we're talking about evict out of your body, evict the dependent person, include doing so in such a way that is fatal to said dependent? And this, by the way, this and the other point goes beyond the abortion issue because, you know, if we're traveling around in space or even around on the ocean, you know, if you're doing picking up hitchhikers and stuff, you know, it gets into the same sort of issues about, well, what rights and obligations exist, and you know, if you're picking up hitchhikers in space or in
Squatter's laws.
I'd encourage people to do one more thing to inform themselves, or at least get themselves thinking. Take the word consciousness and type it into Google, and then just kind of browse around. Because it's either that or you're going to default to a predetermined prejudice that, well, if it's got human DNA, then it must be a person.
Right.
And I would reject that because there's just no rationality to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling, Terry.
All right, enjoy. Tally ho.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, now take all those arguments, and that's why I'm a vegan.
Which we're not getting into today.
Right.
We're going next to Mark. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Pretty good. Hey, you know, most people don't even know that the Roe versus Wade case was actually a fraudulent, it was a fake rape case. It was a fake false accusation of rape.
Okay.
Do your homework. Look it up. Study it. Most people don't even know this.
I am one of the people who doesn't know that, but I will say that whether that's true or not, the legal principle still applies regardless of the particular person's case. I know that Norma McCorvey, who has come out and said that she is Roe, or is it Wade?
Roe.
She was Roe, Jane Roe. That was her fake name, is now a very strong pro-life advocate. And that's fine for her, but it was the Supreme Court's decision, not hers. And if it hadn't been her case, then it would have been another one.
Well, the problem is that 99% of almost all rape cases are... I work for an attorney, now I know this, in Westlake, and they're almost all false. They're almost all fake. It's in order to get
99%.
Ooh, I would really disagree with that.
Yeah, of course you would. Because you're a woman.
Oh.
Yeah.
Try and not get heated here. Okay. Yeah, and not only that, but a lot of actual rapes go unreported.
Yeah. Well, actually,
And a lot
it's
of rapes
physically impossible to rape a woman. If you're under distress, you can't physically do it.
What?
Like animals out in the wild. For example,
I'm
when they're
sorry,
being,
I don't
attacked.
believe you. Some people actually get off on physical stress.
No, you're completely wrong. You don't even know what you're talking about.
Can you prove this?
Ooh.
Of course. Hey,
Because I'm getting a ton of thumbs down around the studio, and they seem a lot more confident than even I am.
Yeah, well, basically everyone
Rape is
an
impossible.
idiot when it comes to the issue of rape,
Everyone,
abortion,
including you.
Hey, I just wanted to ask you.
Wait a minute.
Have you seen that
stop,
episode
hold
of the Daily
it.
Show?
I'm not letting you move on yet.
Where they were talking about
Excuse me, I'm not letting you move on yet. We still have something. You've thrown an assertion out there, and you've said you can prove it. Now prove it. You said that rape is impossible.
Yeah, that's because I'm a man.
Okay, you're wrong.
Ooh, he was going to talk about the Daily Show.
What?
Okay. I don't even really feel the need to respond to that because I think enough viewers out there are probably gritting their teeth and clawing their palms right now.
Rape is impossible. Okay.
Okay.
Steve, and by the way, I didn't cut that guy off because he, just because I disagreed with him, because I don't do that on this show, but I asked for proof, and he said, I know because I'm a man.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't count for proof. And one thing you'll find if you watch this show a lot is that atheists are big on evidence.
Yeah.
Steve.
Hey guys, how
Hi.
y'all doing? Y'all are getting some interesting calls today.
Yes.
We knew that when we decided to talk about a controversial issue.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the issue. It brought back some memories when I first realized what it was, and I agree with what Russell was saying about the. I guess I look at it as the first trimester that belongs to the woman, and the third trimester belongs to the baby, and we're going to debate about the middle ground there on which one is going to win out on that. But with that, as the problem comes into, if you go with this kind of interpretation, it's, well, where does this humanity begin? And that's that gray line. And it also comes up in the cases like the Terry Schiavo at the end of life, is where do we define the death of a human? And with
Absolutely.
With that case, as we were saying, well, she's brain dead. And so at that point, it's okay to pull the plug. And there's a lot of people who, and I think even conservatives, who would have agreed, yeah, pull the plug at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to realize that the action that Congress took was hugely unpopular. You didn't hear a lot about that. But, I mean...
Yeah, but that's the thing I'm saying here, is there's a lot of people who support that once the brain activity is down below a certain level, there's no conscious thought. It's just, reacting to the environment on a subconscious level at best. It's autonomic responses. And so we could apply possibly the same kind of test to a fetus on its brain functions and see, well, where does the point come where it's higher level than what we have determined is the normal operating or minimal operating for, pulling the plug on a human. And so it's a similar kind of issue that we could come in there.
And as a matter of fact, you mentioned the Terry Schiavo. When do you decide if somebody's still alive? That's always a controversial issue, and unfortunately, just about every family is going to have to deal with it at some point or another.
Well, and that's the point. And with the abortion thing, it's every family needs to determine it themselves too. It's that sort of leads to that personal choice thing, and it's a tough decision. And I think it's going to continue to be gray, and we're going to continue to be arguing about it. And I think that's the way we know that maybe things are going right, is that there's continuing argument about it, that we haven't adopted one particular view, that there's always going to be debate, and we're always going to take a new look at it. Is I don't want our society to get stuck into a situation where one of the things I have a problem with the Bible and the religious groups is that they're trying to follow the word that was laid down 1,000, 2,000 years ago. We know a hell of a lot more now, and things change, and so we need to approach it and look at it in a new light. But one of the things I wanted to mention, it just struck me about this issue, is back when I was in the military, and I was stationed over in Germany, and a good friend of mine, she got pregnant over there, and so she decided to get an abortion. And at that time, back in, I think this was late 80s, early 90s, there was a ruling, and I think it came through with it was in the first Bush administration, or maybe it was a carryover from the Reagan administration, that the military, even though they give 100% medical to active duty personnel, I mean, they take care of everything, they would not authorize their medical hospitals, facilities, to conduct an abortion for a military member. She had to go onto the German economy and go into a German medical facility to have an abortion performed. And then before anybody says, well, wait a minute, that was elective surgery, is that the military doesn't have to cover elective surgery, is I would counter that by saying, well, wait a minute, I had a vasectomy back when I was in the States, and the government picked that up 100%. I didn't have to pay a dime for having that done, so that was elective surgery also for a similar kind of purpose. And yet it seems like it's a little discriminatory against a female with her choice for birth control. So anyway, that's all I wanted to mention. So it's been a good information. Terry had some good points. I still think that it's going to come into that consciousness is where we're going with a lot of this stuff. But I think he was a little bit too strict on this rights and obligations, because when you're, at a child, what rights and obligations do you have at that point? Is you have potential. You're not a fully functioning member of society yet.
Okay.
And good luck in the further calls and discussion.
Thanks for calling.
Take care.
Thanks for calling in.
Since Terry Schiavo was brought up, I'd like to mention that there's a weird sort of contradiction in the positions of the people who said that Terry Schiavo should be kept alive at all costs, which is that now that the autopsy has come out, a lot of people are saying, well, it was never about whether she could think or not. It was all about, we don't really know. She's still, it's never right to kill a human being regardless of their mental state. And all I have to say about that is, if that's true, then what was the big deal about the balloon? I mean, why did they make all these arguments about how she was saying, I want to live, and smiling when people came into the room? What was the deal with that if it doesn't matter to whether or not she should have been kept alive?
Well, and not to mention, and I bring this up a lot, the continuing controversy between whether or not keeping somebody alive at all costs is what God wants, or if you're keeping somebody alive at all costs if you're directly going against God. Because if she was going to die without all those man-made machines, then obviously that's God's will, right? So, it's not like they went out and murdered her. They just took her off the man-made machines. Now, if she dies after that, that's God's will. If he wanted her to stay alive, he would have kept her alive, right? I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, actually, I was going to bring up an interesting point. When he was suggesting whether or not, at the end of somebody's life, at what point do you still consider them alive? There's an interesting, when I was working as an intern at a nursing home in Arizona, we had this Hindu woman, and I learned that there's a ritual in Hindu religion that at the end of your life, there's a certain point at which your oldest daughter brings you a holy glass of water and you drink it, and from that point on, you are dead. Even though you're still alive, to the community, to the society, you are considered dead. And I just thought that was interesting. So
okay, that is interesting. We're going next to Jason. Jason, hello.
Hi. As an atheist, I just have a basic question regarding, earlier you said that conception, or however you want to define it, does not, or it precludes a soul. And I guess my question is, how would you define a soul as an atheist, or if that's even possible?
Well, the answer is I don't. Religion, the soul is a religious concept, and barring some very contorted definitions about it being natural, I don't believe in supernatural stuff. And assuming there is a soul, I don't believe in that, whatever you call it.
Yeah, and if you're asking at what point do you decide that a fetus is alive, I think that other caller laid it out very nicely. It has a lot to do with at what point the fetus becomes sentient. It has a lot to do with whether or not there's a brain yet, a working brain. It has to do with whether or not there's a cardiovascular system yet.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
Is that... do you have a definition of soul? I can tell you whether I believe in it or not.
Actually, I don't. And not only do I not have a definition of soul, but I actually wonder if the word has any application, any realistic application.
I think that a lot of religions are dualistic in nature, which means they think that there's the physical stuff, the body, and the electrical impulses going off in your brain, which I think, if you want to describe consciousness, then you've got to start there. But if you're a theist, you also believe there's something else, some other stuff, some kind of soul or spirit.
This is a good segue for me to start talking about what we were talking about in the car last night.
What's that?
I've had some interesting experiences in my life lately. I am a social worker. I recently started working with hospice. And as a hospice social worker, I have gotten closer to being in the presence of death than I have ever been before. And it's been a very interesting experience for me to see someone who 1 minute is alive and the next minute is dead. And you see them when they're dead before they get doctored up by the funeral home, and you see them after they get doctored up by the funeral home. And it's really... It's really a strange experience. You see this person that you knew as a living, breathing, warm-blooded, animate human thinking and feeling, and then you see them and they are completely still, motionless. I can't express the impact of that to you. You have to see it. But you look at this person and they look like they used to look, and you keep expecting their chest to move up and down because they're breathing, or their eyes to flutter or something, and they just don't. They just never do, as long as you stare at them. You touch these people, and after rigor mortis has set in, they're not cold. They don't get unnaturally cold, but they're not warm-blooded creatures anymore. They're hard to the touch, and they look and seem, and in every way, for all intents and purposes, just like the wax dolls that you see at wax museums. And it's really unsettling to look at this object that really is now just an inanimate object. It's not some cryptic, morbid, spiritual, unliving being. It's actually an inanimate object. It is a human body that it no longer has the element of life to it. And when you see the difference between someone being an animate, feeling, breathing, warm-blooded human being and being an inanimate, cold, hard object, it really makes you think about the difference between, that very, very fine line between being alive and being an inanimate object. And I think that's where the idea of the soul comes in. Religious people see that difference, and they sort of define the whole essence of being a living human being as having a soul, having a spirit.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. That actually helps me see it in a different way. I do agree, though, that soul is probably a concept applied by people to describe their experiences or the experiences of others.
Right.
It's more or less an a priori tool or something, as opposed to what can actually be known.
Yeah,
But-
it's sort of a useful device for wrapping your mind around what Keryn was talking about, I guess.
The essence.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Uh-huh.
We've had yes, I see it.
Yeah,
We've
if
had
you
a lot
are-
of had a lot of apparently atheists or at least friendly people call in today. I'd like to remind everybody that the show will be over in 25 minutes, and 45 minutes after that, 6:45, we will be meeting at Shanghai River. The address is right there on your screen, and it's near the Alamo Draft House, and you'll see the marquee from the street when you're on Anderson Lane. And so everybody's welcome to come and have some Chinese food and hang out.
Yay, Chinese food.
Yes.
Okay, you can
Okay,
put that away now.
next. Mike?
Yeah, I was just wanted to say that. Hi. I just want to say that it seems like, to me, there's really two factions in this debate on it. There's people who are common sense, and I think we all are. You all seem to be, but everybody I know is. And then there's the melodramatic people, which tend to be Christians, because they have such a flair for melodrama. And they have nothing else to do. They can't drink.
Gee, I've never noticed that.
I got in a long conversation with another show on this channel called Tell the Truth, and I got in a long argument with this host there who's always goes through this harangue about he had a girlfriend he impregnated when he was like 20, and he said, I was drunk, she went to get an abortion, I wouldn't stop her, and I went and got drunk, to this day I regret it. So that's his cross to bear, so to speak, and I told him,
Yeah, you hear a lot of anti-abortion people talking about the trauma of having an abortion afterwards, which I think largely comes from the fact that so many people argue at them.
And
But you don't hear a lot about the trauma of not having an abortion, which means raising a kid for 18 years, whether you want to or not.
Exactly. And I told him, I said, well, it was her decision to get the abortion. I said, now, after you rolled off of her when you got lucky, your input was done. You had 10 seconds of extreme pleasure. She has 9 months of
you're
carrying
cruel.
that thing, getting sick every day. And so you basically, if there's a quorum of votes, you're like the electoral college of 2 versus her electoral college of 198. And I personally believe that the whole the debate over whether or not abortion should be illegal should be left in the hands of women. I don't think men should have one single say-so about it, just because, just for reasons I've just said. Now, having said
Well, I
that,
think he should be able to have the discussion. It's half his DNA too, after all. When some guys might actually want to take over custody.
Yeah,
I don't think they should have no say, but I think that
there's
they're going to say, they're going to vote.
so many reactions right now. On the one hand, I want to just bring up, a lot of arguments against abortion is, if it's legal, then people will go out and have unprotected sex left and right, and every time they get pregnant, they'll just go have an abortion.
Yeah, because having an abortion is fun. Everybody wants to go through that.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope argument, But also, there's a couple of this website I've been referring to, the National Abortion Federation, which I think is www.prochoice.org, does have one page where it talks about the myths related to an abortion, and one of the myths is something that they call post-abortion depression syndrome. And the myth is that there has never been a medically recognized post-abortion depression syndrome. Now, I'd like to take whatever people would consider would be post-abortion depression syndrome and say, if you actually have to go through the stress of being unprepared to raise a child for 18 years, that's going to be at least, if not more stressful than post-abortion depression syndrome. And the other option, of course, is if you do carry a child to term and then give it up for adoption, the depression you're going to have from giving your child up to adoption is going to be equal to the depression from giving your child up to abortion, but you will have had the stress of carrying a child to term for 9 months, which is not an easy thing for a woman to go through. I don't know if anybody has ever seen a woman.
I can vouch for that.
Husband in the world who's had to put up with a woman who's pregnant for 9 months.
It's a figure of speech, of course.
I like to say that stress is pregnancy is difficult on men and women because the women have to go through it, but the men have to put up with the women who have to go through it.
Sure, but I mean, basically my argument to this guy was women have this, basically it's a parasite that's planted in your body, and whenever it comes to becomes a human. I mean, basically, if you take out your driver's license and look at it, it tells you when your life started. It's called your birthday, and that's when your legal rights started.
Yeah, well, that holds legal weight, but I don't know if it holds any philosophical weight, especially if you believe in a soul.
Philosophical when we're talking about the law. And another thing is when they say that, well, my mother almost got an abortion. I wouldn't have been born otherwise. And I think, oh God, that means I wouldn't have got to go through the 8th grade in Dallas, Texas. That would have broken my heart. And so another thing.
No, it wouldn't have actually. Because
that
I've
never bought that argument because, I have having had a kid and 2 stepkids, I've had a vasectomy now. And every time I have not had it, I mean, think of all the children that I could have had for all these years if I'd had an abortion. I'm sorry. What did I say? Yeah, if I'd not had a vasectomy. That should carry equal weight because there's all the, there's at least 3 babies that have not had a chance at life because I had that operation. So are people going to call me a murderer because of that?
They will, because I said that there's melodrama, and there's nothing makes a better homegrown Law and Order episode than calling you a murderer.
And honestly, if my mother had decided to have an abortion before I was born, I wouldn't be very upset about it because I wouldn't
know about it.
Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to make one last point because I don't want to hog it. I tend to go on too much.
Okay.
But I was watching a news talk show the other day, and there was kind of statistical experts were talking about the fact that they're determine why the crime rate is lower now than it was. Has gotten lower, even though the population has increased. As it's supposed to, as you would expect it to, but they said a lot of the reason is it's 20 years, it's a generation since Roe versus Wade was passed, and it was determined in favor of abortion, and a lot of people who wouldn't have been born, who would have been unwanted, were not born, and therefore grow up and be candidates for a life of crime.
I think I know what you're talking about because I think I rifled through the book of the guy who was talking while I was waiting in line to get Harry Potter.
It could be just considered cold-blooded.
I think it's called Freakonomics, actually.
Huh?
Freakonomics, does that title ring a bell?
I don't remember the name. I'm just remembering I caught it as like Charlie Rose or something like that.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you consider, and I don't really know how to say this without sounding like really cold and biased and stuff, but like if you consider how many children are born to impoverished people or people who are raped or underage people or and then are unwanted, and they tend to grow up in poverty and have not as good educations and not as good medical care, and they grow up to be again, I don't know where I'm going with this, but but it's the educated and well-to-do people that practice birth control and abortion. So eventually
they'll win. The poor people will overtake us.
The
uneducated segment.
We'll be the only ones having babies.
Well, last thing I wanted to say was that this guy, when he brushed me off after I got to talk to him, he said, well, there's nothing worse than not having a heart, or he said, I'm having a cold heart or something like that. And he said, and we just seen evidence of that with our last caller. And I really took offense to that because I was trying to communicate with the guy, and you guys have been really nice to talk anyway. So
yeah, I see your point about melodrama. Anyway, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
We're going to keep moving. We've got 15 minutes left in the show, and then after the show, we'll be going to Shanghai River. We're going on now to Ben.
Yeah, how y'all doing?
Hi.
Good.
Yeah, I was watching that show in regards to baby killing and stuff. I'm against abortion,
Okay.
and
And you are, I'm assuming you're religious, right?
Huh?
I'm assuming you're religious.
No, that doesn't matter. Whether I was or not, I just think that I was watching a show, and that show they were saying that that a baby, an unborn baby, they labeled it fetus, so they won't call it a baby when you know when that knife is stuck behind its head before the head comes out, you know, from the birth tract.
Okay.
And on that show also, it was stating that all those unwanted babies.
I've got a question. Do you believe that there isn't any distinction to be made between, let's say, a 1-year-old and a 1-day-old blastocyst?
A 1 day, well, there's responsibility behind that when you do that act, to create a baby. There's
Yeah, but that wasn't the question. Do you think there is an actual difference between the clump of cells that exists at the moment after conception and a 1-year-old toddler?
No, it's going to be a 1-year-old toddler if you leave it alone. If you leave it alone, it's going to be a 1-year-old pretty soon.
Okay.
With that logic, then you're going to say that if you leave it alone, it's eventually going to die anyway.
No. I mean, it's in the womb. It's going to develop, and after birth, and after birth, it'll reach a 1 year.
Well, sure, and eventually it's going to grow old and die. So what's the difference now between if you kill it when it's 1 day old embryo, or if you just leave it alone to grow old and die?
Well, right now, my dog had puppies out there, and if Humane Society find out that I've killed a couple of puppies just to get rid of them, put them in a little bag or whatever, I'm going to go to jail. And
right, I agree with you, but that doesn't address the question of whether the puppies are different from
it's a life,
a sperm.
It's a life. That unborn child.
All right. So do you think that a woman who has an abortion should receive the death penalty, for instance?
Oh, I don't know about that. It's society to choose.
Well, suppose you were the judge. Suppose you were up there, you have a woman who had an abortion. Would you recommend the death penalty?
Well, me? No, I don't know about that.
Okay, what if you had a woman who killed her 1-year-old child?
Yeah.
So there is a difference.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about, that it's responsibility. That woman that is pregnant, leaving that child is born, it's going to be 1 year old, after a year after birth.
Right. But you think there's a difference. You think the woman who killed the 1-year-old should get the death penalty, but you don't think that the woman who had an abortion should get the death penalty.
Well, that baby is not born yet, and leave it to get born, and after it's born,
Yeah, I gotcha, but you just said there was a difference.
Well, society makes the laws and stuff, and
yeah, but I'm suggesting that if you were the judge, you would. That's the way you would recommend on each case. Am I wrong?
I don't know that. I would have to think of what's going on. What were what happened to her?
Okay, so it depends on the circumstances, not on the baby.
What's that?
So it depends on the circumstances, not on the baby.
Well, she fell off the stairs or whatever, and the unborn baby, it needs to be born first before it can make it on its own, and when somebody else does the killing, the murdering.
Actually, a baby has to go a lot farther than just be born in order to be able to make it on its own.
That's true.
Yeah, it gets born. To killing babies like that, there's consequences. On that show, they were saying that right now Social Security is going to be in trouble pretty soon.
Social Security already is in trouble.
What's that?
Social Security already is in trouble.
Well, you know.
Wait, so are you going to argue that because there's a problem with Social Security that the solution is to have more people in the country?
Well, let me get to it. Before Wade versus Roe, there were 21 point something employees per retiree. I think right now there's only about 7. And
so
by the time you all
you think that the solution would be to have more and more kids?
By the time you all retire, there'll probably be 2 or 3 employees.
That doesn't have anything to do with how many babies are being born.
So
that has to do with the fact that people are living longer and still retiring at the age of 65. Which means that for the last 45 years of their life, they are retired. Whereas
that has something to do with how many babies were killed. There were at one time 21.7 I think employees per worker per retiree.
So
and
let me just make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Are you saying that your solution to the Social Security problem is just to keep having more and more and more kids? So
no, just
like a pyramid scam or something.
Instead of killing off the workers, that's what that baby's going to be. It's going to be a worker.
How is that different from what I just said?
What was that?
How is that different from what I just said?
I didn't hear your statement.
But the thing is, those babies are going to be workers for a little while, but the more of them you have, the more retired seniors they're going to be, and that's just going to...
They're going to live even longer by the time they retire.
That's going to worsen the Social Security problem, not improve it.
It's going to be through... All them babies that were killed weren't killed in 1 year. It's been over, 35 or 40 years, how long... it started as the mass murder.
I've got one last question, but then we're going to have to move on because we're running out of time on the show.
Yeah.
Do you think that my decision to have a vasectomy was murder?
No.
But if I hadn't had a vasectomy, then I could have had a lot more babies, right?
No, hold on.
You're contributing to the Social Security problem.
You made a responsible. In my opinion, you made a responsible move to...
But by doing that move, I prevented babies from being born, and they could have grown up to be 1-year-olds and then workers and then retirees, right?
But you see, that baby was never... it was never at the point of conception where you...
So what?
You contributed that ingredient to make a baby. So you didn't murder a baby.
Yeah, and by the same token, an aborted fetus was never at the point of birth.
Well, it was already at conception.
It seems to me kind of arbitrary.
It was already at conception. That baby was conceived.
So what? Why put the line at conception as opposed to, let's say, decision? We could say that a baby is a human as soon as the man has the woman's bra unhooked.
Hello, am I still there?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it was created, and that baby was created whenever a woman and whatever. But since you had a vasectomy, you prevented that, so you didn't kill anything,
But he's also not contributing to the workforce.
Well,
right,
he did his portion of it. He said he already had a baby, and he...
I had one, but I'm not a Catholic. I could have had 20 by now.
Didn't you...
I couldn't.
Didn't you adopt 2?
No, I have stepkids. My wife had some.
2 stepkids, that's part of it. I mean, you can't be... Not everybody's going to have 20 babies, some are going to have 1 or 2. But
by not having babies, they're worsening the Social Security situation, and they're preventing a life from being born, which would have been born otherwise.
This is what he said, not what he said.
Do you know why Bush right now is allowing a lot of immigrants to get legalized workers? Because those workers are... Those workers are taking the place of a lot of those babies that got murdered
I find that really hard to believe that it's his rationale, and I'd love to discuss it with you further. Maybe you can write me by email. But
just take a look at the big picture.
6 minutes left on the show. I'm sorry. Please email us.
Take a look at the big picture and arrive at a conclusion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
We have time for 1 or 2 more calls, and I'm being told by the studio. Well, I'm going to go with Brian. He's been on the line for a while. Brian?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hi.
I just have a
You're going to have to make it quick, I'm afraid.
I have a question for Keryn. I just wanted to ask, where do you prefer it in the pink?
Where do I what?
He was going to ask where you prefer to eat dinner, and you've already answered Shanghai.
Is that what he was going to ask?
No. Paula.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. We're talking about abortion.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's partial birth abortion, which is what I guess the gentleman before me described.
Mm-hmm.
Life, I think, as a whole, whether we want to accept it or not, is precious. Whether it's a minute old, the amazing thing is that they have pregnancy tests that will tell you if you have conceived one day into the conception. That's pretty miraculous when you think about it.
Well, we don't think of it as miraculous because miraculous is a religious concept, and this is the atheist experience.
I'm going to go on my tangent here, okay, guys? I'm sorry, but if life as a whole is precious, then do you eat meat?
Yes, I do.
Do you wear leather?
Yes, I do.
I don't.
So what's your
I
point?
think life as a whole is precious. I don't eat meat and I don't wear leather. I think that if you're going to nitpick between whether or not a life is a life at 1 day after conception, or if it's a life at 1 year after birth, you kill things all the time.
Okay, let me ask you a
well
question.
After they've been born or conceived.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Atheist Experience.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What's an atheist?
An atheist is someone who does not believe in any gods. Although some atheists also believe in the supernatural, most of the time they don't.
So what does all this have to do with the atheist does not believe in any god or a god?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so how did you get here?
Parents,
How did your parents get here?
their parents.
Okay, how did creation begin?
Do you want me to discuss abiogenesis and cosmology with you? We
you
don't
can
have time for
your own. You can lean to your own understanding. Okay?
Yes.
And I understand the atheist experience. I'm talking to you guys who don't believe there is a God.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna leave this with you, and I'll hang up. Okay.
All right.
There will come a day where every knee
I've
shall
heard
bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord for the glory of God.
Okay. Do you have evidence for that?
Yes. You talk about the atheist experience.
Yes.
That means you've had an experience.
No.
we're talking
the
about
show
our
is called
daily-
The
Well, no. I
Atheist
mean, you
Experience.
have something that you know for a fact.
No.
There is no God.
No.
No.
I
I'm
have
sorry.
fact that there is a God.
No.
Okay.
No, atheist does not mean we know for a fact that there is a God.
Well, then why are you
Atheist means
arguing
that
it?
we
if you don't know?
believe-
Why are you arguing something that you don't know?
Because there is no good evidence, no good reason to believe
Well, there
that
is no good
a God
evidence for you
the
to
same
tell me that
reason-
there is no God.
The burden of proof is on the person that's trying to assert something, not on the person that's trying not to assert something.
Ma'am, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, I would like
sorry.
to refer you, by the way, to our website has a fact page if you want to know the answer to where we believe we came from, where we believe existence
Well, I know
came
what
from,
the
and
Big
creation
Bang and
and
all
all
this
that.
stuff. Everything just came out of nowhere, and it just happened. My God, what creativity! What an awesome power! So it must come from somewhere.
You need to, I think, have a little science education before you go around.
Before
you go around saying
I
that
have
this
enough
is just
science
stuff that somebody
education,
makes up.
sir. I think
What
you
level
need an
of science
awakening.
education?
You need an awakening.
What level of science education do you have?
We need an awakening, and you need
You need
to
an
study some
awakening.
science. Okay.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank
an
you.
awakening.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Amen.
Thanks.
All right. Whatever
Okay.
book you're reading, okay? Whatever book you're reading. Well, okay, Carl
Harry
Sagan.
Potter.
Carl
And Harry
Sagan
Potter.
is not God. So if
Harry
that's
Potter
your
is.
God,
He's
Jesus
not
Christ
God.
is
We
mine.
don't believe in any gods.
Well, you're obviously believing in other people. So
Yeah.
you're serving somebody. Somebody's feeding you what you believe. Okay, so those are your gods.
No.
Okay,
No.
Jesus Christ is
No,
mine.
I'm sorry.
He's my,
You haven't understood the concept
he's
of
my
atheism.
God.
But I don't think
Okay.
you've even understood the concept of God if you think that other people who are feeding us information are God.
Well, ma'am,
Somebody
I mean,
called us
you
last
have
month
to,
and
you,
told
you
us
need
that
to,
we were God.
in
So.
order for you to believe that whatever there is no God, you must be getting your information from other people that believe like you believe.
Sure,
Okay.
we take the information
we
we
can't
see and
continue to argue this. We have 20 seconds left
Okay.
on the show.
So-
Please
so
feel
just
free
know
to
that
mail
one
TV
day
at
you will
Atheist.
stand before
I'm
God.
sorry. I'm really sorry.
Okay. Thank
12
you.
seconds left. TV at atheist-community.org. Meet at Shanghai River in 45 minutes if you're atheist or atheist friendly. Goodbye.